What's up, everyone? This is Josh from East West Healing. Today I want to talk about hemosiderin. Now, we don't really know what that is. Let's say hemosiderin in relation to anemia. But before we jump into this complex topic, which I'm not going to make it complex, and as always, you can check out the description because I always post stuff there as well. But always like this video, show us a little support. Hit that notification button. Just hit that subscription button. Do yourself a favor. Because every single Wednesday we put out a video, you get notified. Let's jump in. Okay, let's jump in. So as you know, if you follow work, we feel like anemia is a very misunderstood topic. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because of course, if you lose your leg, or you have bleeding in your gut, etc., you lose blood, you're going to have low iron, low copper, etc. So we know it exists, but we're saying how it's defined and how it's really interpreted is really where we've gone wrong. But a huge piece of this that's never really talked about, and you can learn more from other YouTubes that we have, as well as our Instagram page. We have an entire highlight on anemia. And I'll talk about it a little here because it's driven by copper. Well, the enzymes that drive the iron recycling system, right, are copper-dependent enzymes. Hepcidin, ferroportin, ferroxidase. These are enzymes that need copper to be activated so we can get iron through the different pieces like the enterocytes, hepatocytes, red blood cells, etc., into the blood so it can be recycled. Right? Not only recycled, but we still get some, or should get some, from the foods that we eat, that heme iron from like steak and organ meats and things like this, or getting the copper from certain foods like, shellfish, or retinol from the fatty fish and the dairy and the eggs and the organ meats. So all these things play a role, but if those aren't coming in, of course, you're going to be diagnosed with anemia, but that's not really the problem. The problem is what you're not eating to support your iron recycling systems. You don't really need a lot of iron. You don't need to take iron supplementation. Our foods don't need to be fortified, right? But here's the thing, hemosiderin, it's a protein, right? And it really is the degradation of ferritin protein, right? So think of, I've done a video on ferritin. A lot of people like to diagnose anemia by just ferritin alone. It's just as risky or reckless as diagnosing hypothyroidism, but by just TSH alone. As I've said a million times, I'd be like taking your car in and they check your tire pressure and say, you need a complete new frame, axles and tires. And you'd be like, wait a second, my tire pressure's off. Doesn't make any sense, right? So you can't just test ferritin. We recommend the full Monte Iron panel. You can do it through, request a test through Ultra Labs, and it looks at all the different minerals, especially copper and ceruloplasmin and transferrin and your iron side, your iron and zinc and retinol and all these different things. Kind of give you a big picture of your iron recycling system. But ferritin is a protein that's found in the cell. It shouldn't be in your blood. So when it's in your blood and you see it high, we have a problem. We've always said ferritin should be 20 or even less. But it just depends on what copper, the ratio to copper to ceruloplasmin is, what is ceruloplasmin, what is retinol. Because if those are normal in your ferritin 6, then you're good. But if those are low in your ferritin 6, we know it's a copper issue, right? So you can't just look at one value. But if your ferritin, let's say, is 1,000, like mine was back in 2014, 15, somewhere in there, we know we got to dig deeper because something's going on. Now, if you have hemochromatosis, that's a different ball game. Of course, you need to support the iron recycling system with food and use chelating supplements and always donate blood if you truly have hemochromatosis. That's a different discussion, but in a sense, it's all treated the same, right? We just like to label it with something different. But ferritin should always be in the cell. It shouldn't be in the blood. So when you start seeing it build up, it's almost like an alarm's going off. We need to investigate the why. But really the why is this. Iron is loaded into ferrin via a ferroxidase enzyme, which is copper dependent. It's that simple. So if we don't have copper to load the iron into the ferritin, which is like a safe, right? It begins to create inflammation. And that inflammation causes the cell to just kind of spit it out. And I'm just simplifying this into your blood, right? And it's going to constantly do that. But we know that if that's happening, in a sense, we have a copper deficiency, which means we have a ceruloplasmin deficiency because you have copper and it's loaded via retinol into different, let's say, just different places in the body, in the gut and the liver. that allows you to create a bound copper or bioavailable copper, which is ceruloplasmin protein, which allows you to activate oxygen, produce energy, and produce all your copper-rich antioxidants. This helps you to recycle iron, produce energy, support all your recycling systems, even autophagy, etc. So if we don't have that bioavailable copper, for many reasons, medications, chronic stress, certain supplements, all these things chelate copper. If we don't have it, we can't load iron into ferritin, spit into the blood. That's a problem. But that safe can only hold so much. So once that ferritin keeps building up and building up into the blood, it begins to degrade. And when it degrades, you get the hemosiderin protein, right? It's a degradation of ferritin. Think of hemosiderin, it's under the skin. Think of it as like a vault. If the safe is full, we have to start putting stuff in the vault. The problem is to get stuff out of the vault is much harder than getting it out of the safe. So when people have high hemosiderin, or let's say, and I'll explain this next time, but let's say someone does have hemosiderin, it's much harder to get it out of the vault and much harder to regulate, and it takes way longer to regulate than just high ferritin, right? So this hemosiderin protein is a degradation of ferritin because we're copper deficient. Now we know there's an inflammatory process. There's a little fire, and all of a sudden we have this 500,000 acre forest fire. That's hemosiderin. And you can actually see it in people's bodies, right? It's a brownish, yellowish pigment that usually is created. And a lot of the times, it's kind of like a melasma, right? That is the hemosiderin. A lot of the times when people are just, their vault is being overloaded with hemosiderin, you'll see that brownish kind of pigment on their calves. Now, it's not a birthmark. I'm not talking about that. It's a noticeable brownish, blotchy pigment that creates on their calves. Some women get on their neck and their face, right? This is hemosiderin. And it's been shown through research, which is in the description, that animals fed a copper-rich diet have high hemosiderin. And now the research shows that animals, as well as us, that are fed diets high in iron have high levels of hemosiderin. Why? Because we don't need that iron. It creates a forest fire. It dysregulates the relationship with copper. We don't have copper. We can't load this, right? We spit ferritin. That degrades into hemosiderin. It builds up. If we don't have copper, we can't load that iron. That causes ferritin to be spit in the blood, and over time degrade. We get hemosiderin. Now, the biggest question is like, how do I fix this? And of course, it's not going to be, the treatment plan is not going to be found on YouTube. I know you can look to how to fix your toilet, how to do all these different things on YouTube. How to find a personalized treatment plan cannot be found on YouTube. But the most important thing is really looking at what you're eating to support the iron recycling system. Just really, I could say eat more retinol-rich foods, eat more copper-rich foods, like I mentioned. But it's really just eating more mineral-rich foods. And it's not, I'm not saying don't eat carbohydrates. But what I am saying is people don't eat enough protein. And people don't eat enough of a variety of protein. And this is where you're going to get those minerals to support the iron recycling system. The shellfish, the whitefish, the fatty fish, the organ meats. More of those. I'm not saying you can't have chicken and muscle meats and steak and eggs and dairy. Those are great. But we need more of the other things to support iron recycling, right? That is the kicker. From there, it really depends on what your full Monty is showing. Some people do need, once they're supporting iron recycling, that's all they need. Some people need some iron chelation supplements, and some people down the line, once that foundation is set, right, and they've built up their minerals a little bit to support the iron recycling system, some people do need to donate blood to get some of that ferritin and some of that iron out of the system for a period of time, right? Because we have to unload the vault and unload the safe, right? So we get that browning in the skin to drop. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to do that, because I've worked with people who haven't donated blood, and all they've done is support iron recycling with food, and they've been able to desaturate the system, and they're fine. So it's all personalized, but it involves food, some supplements, and possible blood donation. So this is a big topic. So if it confuses you, put your questions below. Always do a little bit more research on your own and dig a little bit on, the web, or buy some books, do a little bit reading. But as always, you got questions, put them below. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support. I'm out.